No, I think they do. I think the
What
only.
the dog doing?
I need 1 second. I gotta deal with this. I'll be right back.
Yo.
Hey, bud. Yo, you said earlier that you saw the hunters were all eagerly awaiting a post today. How did you? How were you guys waiting for a post? How did you know a post was coming soon?
Well, I think we've gotten a blue post from the designer every single week. So people kind of now just keep the thread open and wait for him to start typing. And he's been doing it on Friday the past few weeks. So it's it gets me through the day, through the work day at least.
Dude, what you just said is so tilting to like so many other classes.
Oh yeah.
It's like, yeah, we're just used to like the weekly Friday giant post, so we're usually just sitting around waiting for him to start typing. Meanwhile, other classes just don't get any communication at all.
Yeah, the classes that are also in a bad spot, I feel bad for them. Some of them already are really good, like the shaman tree. But like someone like mage or shadow priest, yeah, they're pretty down bad right now.
Yeah, actually, I should do it. Maybe a good idea would be actually rating a tier list based on like classes that are currently in a good spot versus in shambles. And I wonder, and then the combination would be like how good your tree is and how much communication you're getting. I wonder who's like the worst.
I'm biased, but I would say before today, the hunter class tree was by far the worst. Like it's not even close, but it's a lot better now.
Yeah, the hunter class tree kind of sucked.
But I mean, they've already removed 2 like totally dead talents, which is really nice to see. As long as they keep adding impactful talents that are like kind of like good in all forms of content, then that's a good thing. But yeah, the hunter and the mage tree suffer from the same thing, where it's like they have 10 less nodes compared to every other class, which just severely limits what they can actually take.
Wait, is that actually true?
Yeah. Hunter has, I think, 36. Mages have 37. And the average of every other class is like 45 and a half or something.
Dude, I would love to see like an actual sheet showing that. And I think that's like kind of an actual like being able to look at what I've been talking about with basically just some classes have more buttons than other classes. And that laying it all out like that will make it more obvious.
Yeah, I'll link you the one that this guy made.
Because like that's like this. Okay, I would like to see that. That's like something that I was looking at with the hunter tree, is comparing it to like shaman, for example. That's like, oh well, you get all your throughput, and the rest of it is just picking the specific utility you need for that exact encounter, and it has stuff you haven't had before. And then you're just looking at the amount of buttons in general that shaman has across its specs, and it's just like hunter has nowhere close to that. Also, it's not a surprise that 2 triple DPS classes like mage and hunter are both in the same boat there. Classes that have like healer and tank specs just naturally have much more buttons, with rogues being the obvious exception because they just have like a million keybinds for some reason. But okay.
Yeah, I linked you the sheet. You can look at it later. It's like probably like 95% accurate. He updates it somewhat regularly.
Who did this?
Some guy in the hunter Discord.
Oh, Marquinis. 16. Okay, so it shows you the average cost per point, talking about how many nodes there are versus the cost.
Yeah, so like the main columns I look at, like the number of nodes, right? So that's just like the unique, points in the tree, and then the cost is like how many talents it would take to fill out the entire tree.
Oh, is this just specs?
The second tab is classes at the top.
Look at that. 45, 49, 48, 41, and then just hunter and mage 36. And those are like 2 of the worst trees too. So I guess it could
and then if you notice, like the cost of the tree is kind of similar between all the classes. It's just that means like we have a lot less nodes, but the overall cost to fill out the tree is the same, just because there's so many shitty like 2 and 3 point nodes. But this change today has started to fix that, which is a step in the right direction.
Oh, they only got rid of 2 points though, right? And they didn't. I guess they
added 2 or 3, I think. Yeah, I'd like them to add more. Honestly, like I'd like to see the number of nodes be over 40. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I feel
I'm not going to complain too much because they removed some totally dead talents and added actual impactful things that like anybody can use. You can use them as a solo player, as a PvP, or a Mythic Plus, or a Raider. That's
Okay.
how it should be.
All right. So what do you think about the big things today? So you now have survival of the fittest as all three specs, which will probably be a guaranteed take in the class tree, and then you're also getting as lone wolf and with a pet the ability to have a 20% max HP for. Well, okay, that one's like big. I guess it just depends on how long it is, right? We both don't know the cooldown and the actual duration, right?
Yeah, and that's what they're probably going to have to think a lot about. As long as it's not like a 3 minute cooldown, 6 second duration, I'm cool with this. If it's 2 minutes or less, like 130 or 2 minutes, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you guys,
Um,
well, it's also, and you're including what it's going to be reduced with Born to Be Wild, right?
so the new ability is not reduced by Born to Be
Oh,
Wild,
just
but
survival of the
survival of
fittest.
the fittest. Yeah, and that's I think it's a curious like inclusion there because in the new choice node they let you reduce the cooldown or have higher DR. I would think that higher DR is almost always going to be taken, but
It
not
depends on
that's
how
not
much
that's
it
not
is.
yeah.
Dude, I was thinking about that more in Shaman. Like, I saw Shamans, like, kind of just saying, oh, you're always just going on a bigger astral shift. I don't know if that's true at all, by the way. Like,
It's entirely fight dependent.
I mean, if you even, I think it's like dungeon dependent, and I also think it's like a field thing. Like just having a lot of the time, it's not about overall total damage reduction. Like, I actually, looking more at the Shaman one, I feel like you're going to play the lower cooldown. Uh, you're gonna be playing. Oh fuck, where's Shaman? You're gonna be playing the lower cooldown, higher uptime, and also like the increased duration thing more than the other one. I feel like you would only want to take Astral Bulwark in a situation where you know using it on a fight will allow you to live, where Plains
Yeah.
Traveler would not, because like you're just gonna get so many more free uses. Like, it's just like the total amount of damage reduced is way less important than just having coverage and making sure you're alive for something, and that's just better. I don't
Definitely,
know.
but I love the ability to have both. Because like if you're doing like let's say you're someone like James and you're pushing plus 30 keys, like you might need to take the extra DR for a boss fight.
Well, I wonder, dude. That's also interesting. So the initial, so again, the same person who made the hunter tree is giving you survival of the fittest, and then a choice node that is the exact same as the shaman, astral shift, and plains traveler, astral bulwark. So, and interestingly enough, astral bulwark after a
Also
nerf.
increases the duration.
Well, yeah, but the thing is like this initially was a 20% extra DR for Astral Bulwark, and they ended up nerfing it because shamans were so innately tanky, which was a correct decision. But hunters are not so insanely tanky, so I wonder if it's going to make survival of the fittest a 40, and that will be fat as fuck. Like, that is huge stonks for hunter if you guys have a 40%
Yeah.
DR. That is
Yeah,
insane.
and it's a 3 minute cooldown on a 6 second duration. Like that's, it's still not anything game breaking, but combine that with turtle exhilaration and this new
No,
thing,
and
and
no, it's
that's
gonna be
perfect.
no, it's perfect. Yeah,
Perfect.
no, you're gonna like even Born to Be Wild. Like, okay, if you have a 24% Born to Be Wild with 2 points next week, even a 3 minute cooldown is already like a little bit more than two, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
220 or something like that. So I mean, like that, and then you could maybe baseline reduce the duration even more by like it'll probably be 30 seconds or maybe a minute or something like that, and then you could have like even more coverage. I think I want to say that like we'll get into like the Sentinel thing in a second, but I want to say that survival of the fittest being a again potentially a shorter CD, potentially a higher DR choice node based on the encounter, and also getting reduced. I think that basically solves Hunter's defensiveness issue.
I
Just
totally agree. I
like
think it's
yeah,
perfect, and I would kind of like, I'm not a designer for a reason, and I would like, I didn't want them to have to think too hard, right? So I'm like, okay, just bring back some of the conduits we have now, or Azurite traits we had in Legion. But a lot of people didn't want that because they don't want to have to use Feign Death as a defensive or disengage as a defensive, and they found a way to give us a brand new ability that is a defensive without having to use our utility spells. So it's perfect.
is there anything by if you just feel like you have to take this 20% maximum HP for duration? Is that would maybe a criticism of that? Are there other pets where you want their abilities that you sometimes would not have this as any spec in the game, or is it just like basically every other ability won't matter because this is so much better? The tenacity
So
thing specifically.
it's I like the trade-off. Like for like survival hunters, you use the leech pet in this raid like exclusively because it gives you 10% leech and the ability to lust, which you wouldn't have with a tenacity pet. You can always, dismiss your pet though and summon another one in lust. So it's a
Yeah.
trade-off of like because each pet has like an active ability it gives you and then a passive. So tenacity is you already get 5% extra or 5% increased HP plus this ability.
I feel like, dude, of all the classes in the game that are noticeably not tanky, I think hunters just left that conversation. I think they're actually out of it.
Yeah, I'd say it's mid tier, which is perfect for a class that has an
Yeah.
immunity,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
that's how it should
100%.
be. Like we shouldn't be warlocks or LE shamans. I mean, warlocks shouldn't even be as tanky as they are, but
Yep.
that's a whole other issue.
Maybe that gets addressed soon. We'll see.
Yeah, if they get a 40-second dark pact, I mean, that's something.
No, I think they do. I think the only.
What the dog doing?
I need 1 second. I gotta deal with this. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Oh yeah, so classes that are now, like, there's almost every class in the game is in like the mid tier. Like they have the defensiveness required. They're not a defensive liability. They're not insanely powerful with it. Some classes have immunity, some don't. There's like that mid tier, and then like at the top, there's like fire mage. Fire mage is definitely in that top tier now because they still have cauterize, they still have an immunity, and they also have greater invisibility now. So like they're 100% in that top tier. Shadow priests are probably also near the top tier depending on the situation. Like Ellie shamans and warlocks or just shamans and warlocks are probably in the top tier, and everyone else is mid. The class in the bottom now, I think Hunter has left that with this, assuming it isn't like, an insane, like a 5-minute CD or something. Then I think that's like an issue. But assuming it's like a 1, 2, or a 3 for Fortitude of the Bear, I think Hunters leave that, leaving basically Ret Paladin. Even though they got a little bit better with having access to like a personal spell wording, I guess. Both Holy and Disc Priest, I think, are now... Holy and Disc Priest are now for sure the classes that exist that are the weakest, I want to say.
Yeah, they're pretty squishy.
I'm just trying to think of classes that die in raid and just like, oh... Like Discipline Priest on Sludge Fist had to PS themselves. Like, yeah. that is a cry for help. So yeah, that is I think there's very few classes. The only reason I'm mentioning this is it's possible that maybe Disc and Holy in PvE could gain some kind of defensiveness. So there's really not any class that's just a major liability. Because I think the mid tier is like pretty natural. I don't think any class should be in the low tier. Being in the low tier is a problem that is not made up for in other areas.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if they reeled back Warlock a little bit too.
Okay, now Sentinel Owl. This is probably on the GCD. Because it's based on the Kyrian ability, I imagine it will also be a 1-minute cooldown. But that's also totally up in the air. But has the ability to make you line of sight by just selecting it, which is probably never a point you would take, I don't think. Just alone, like not with the choice node under it. But then with the choice node under it, it allows your entire party to ignore line of sight, which sounds pretty broken in dungeons, or the ability to give your party some leech and avoidance. Now, it didn't say a massive amount of leech and avoidance, so I'm guessing those numbers are way closer to 10% than anything higher than that. What do you think?
I would guess they wouldn't go above 10. I think it's really cool if they're bringing this like resonating arrow back in a sense, not tying it to throughput at all. I could totally see them putting it in the third tier where all the throughput talents are, though, and I wouldn't even hate it because you actually have free points as an MM Hunter to use, but the other specs not so much. So who knows where it'll go. And then choice A, yeah, like that, making it apply to your party members. The LOS part of it is awesome. It has insane uses in PvP, battlegrounds, also dungeons. In a raid, it's a very niche thing, and it's not like raid utility that hunters need. You're not gonna bring them for this. Now, choice B is like, it's whatever. Like, I kind of wish they just didn't make this a choice node, and choice A was just a talent underneath it. I feel like they're gonna try and use this leech and avoidance party-wide thing as like, oh, hey hunters, here's your utility, and you guys are good now. But this is really, it's not going to swing the needle whatsoever in terms of, hey, you need to bring a hunter to the raid.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, there's like different levels to this. Like, not every class needs to get raid utility by having necessarily a raid buff. Even though it is worth mentioning that almost every class in the game now does have a raid buff, and there's very few that don't. So they're trying to like make up for that by giving them a bunch of small things. Like a party-wide cooldown plus defensiveness might be like, okay, well now this class is better, but it's never something you need. Where every other class has something you need. It's potentially something you want, but never in a raid. Specifically with Leech, Like giving healers leech would be pretty good, but you're probably not going to be in a healer group. Giving your dungeon group leech on a big AoE pull is very fucking good. That's probably the best thing for that. So it's kind of like doubling down on Hunter just being already like a pretty strong dungeon class. But I don't know if that really gives them any raid utility at all. Like I actually went back, I think you were in the stream where we looked back at like every boss for the last while. Even bosses that actually had major line of sight mechanics. So there hasn't been any this expansion, but like actually I think maybe one of the only ones ever is Ashara. But it's because it's only party wide. I don't even know how much use you would even get.
It's not enough. Yeah, something that's party wide is gonna have to have more of an impact on the raid, like a Skull Banner. Which even Skull Banner is not the most impactful thing, which probably makes it easier to balance. But the Skull Banner, the Rogue ability, Wind Fury, those are all like significant enough party wide buffs that you'd be like, hey, we'll strongly consider bringing this spec or class to a raid. This by itself is too niche to really consider it. Even where it might be good, you might not even bring a hunter still.
That being said, that is unless this gives you like 20% avoidance or something. Like if it's on a 1 minute CD and you're giving a party of people 20% avoidance on some raid fights, that is pretty close to being insane. It's like basically would just be like what Zephyr is. I think actually it would be Zephyr without the movement speed, right? Because Zephyr I think is specifically AoE attacks, and I think that is the exact verbiage for what avoidance is. So it would actually be the same thing. Yeah. That could definitely be strong, but I mean you're kind of just doing two of the same thing, and again, it's not something you would have to bring. It would be something that's redundant with another class. It's not like you're going to need an evoker or a hunter in every group to like live stuff if this is like on a 1 or 2 minute cooldown or something, if it's that high. But that being said, I think we'll have to wait and see if this is going to be enough raid utility, because if that number for leech is somewhere around like, dude, even 10% leech would like, I mean, that's very noticeable when you're
and I think that's the problem though, is like if it's 10 or 20% leech, that's too good in Mythic Plus, right? Like we saw that back in Legion with the Blood Death Knight stuff. So even then, it's like I don't really like this that much. It's going to be too oppressive in dungeons, but not strong enough in a raid environment. I'd rather just see them keep choice A and not have choice B, and then potentially, think about adding something else. And I can't confirm this whatsoever, but as you know, like there are class designers that talk in the class discords, and one of them was saying that they're wary of adding too many raid buffs, which is kind of weird because they're adding Mark of the Wild, which is probably the best raid buff that they've ever added. So I'm confused by that statement, if that's true. So
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that couldn't even be a super deep statement. That could be a very basic statement. You could just be saying, well, we're weary of adding too much of anything. Well, of course. And I mean, but like one of their bits this expansion is a focus of theirs is adding a bunch of party and raid utility to the entire game. So obviously something you'd have to be cognizant of is if you're doing that too much.
And my point is like, why? I don't know why they're so afraid of the redundancy. And something that you've talked about too. It's you don't need 5 classes that can give Battle Shout. But if you're not going to have scrolls in the game that are a lesser effect, at least let a second class provide Battle Shout and Fortitude.
Yep.
Because as it stands now, those buffs are too strong. You can't balance them in a way that, like, you literally have to bring a warrior, monk, demon hunter, priest, and mage to a raid 99% of the time.
And if you do, and then like there's 2 arguments to that, or 2 different sides of it. You're saying you have to bring them to raid, but then they would get into their whole like game 1 and game 2 conversation. Yeah. So I don't even usually phrase it like that, because like we'll do whatever, but it's more actually the opposite side, where it's the AOTC friend group with 10 to 15 man raiders. There are sometimes more than 10 to 15 things you want in a raid, and unless they have the absolute perfect comp, extremely unlikely. They feel bad that they're not playing certain classes, and one of 2 things happens. Their fights are way harder because they're missing multiple raid buffs, or their friends are playing classes they do not like or like as much to make sure that their raid is stronger. And both of those things are super weird, and that's the most people who are affected by something like that. And yeah, I think you're right. Like adding some, like if they're worried about adding too many raid buffs, you could fix that by adding some redundancies, which like the hunter thing we talked about is like super like slam dunk thing to bring back, because it's already in the game. It solved that problem previously, it could solve it again. But also that you're saying like they're wary about adding too many raid buffs. Sure, your focus is adding raid buffs, but and raid utility, and not sometimes classes have, you know, an automatic spot in raids even if they don't have a 1 hour long raid buff. There is like some intricacies there. Almost every class in the game has one now. Like last expansion it was weird, it was like you had half, but now it's like almost every class has a reason why you would bring at least one of them to a raid at all times, and it's just a few classes are left out. And even with this change, hunters are still one of those classes. So I think that's the main point of contention, right?
Definitely. Yeah, and it's, you know, they already had this in the game in WoD. I just, you know, it'd be nice to see them bring it back. Or, hey, if they don't want to give Hunter like a strict raid utility, just bring back scrolls.
Yeah, I feel like they would definitely rather, with them talking, whenever they talk about game 1 and game 2, they talk about this super collaborative effort with you and your teammates to bring different powers to the raid, or to a group. They would definitely be more likely to add redundancies via class abilities than they would to bring scrolls back. It sounds like scrolls are just like, to them, are like a super uninteractive version of that kind of facilitates the like game 2 thing, and then game 1 is you know, you would have the ability to bring that. So I think they'd be more likely to add redundancies than they ever would to bring scrolls back, but I would argue that they absolutely need to do one of them. That's for sure.
And then obviously they could, you know, for Hunter specifically, they could bring back Fox or make Eagle party-wide, even like the Evoker thing that was data mined. And yeah, you could potentially add like a sated debuff to it to prevent abuse, but even that I'm not sure if you would.
Not even abuse. I mean, you could just, I mean, yeah, but you could just, that could be a raid buff. It's like you basically can just have one aspect of the Fox in your raid, and that's already of a pretty high power level, would give Hunters a raid spot. There's multiple ways to tackle it, right? But then it kind of buys into the whole raid buff thing in general, where if someone's group is doing Anduin on Heroic with 12 people and they don't have a Hunter, and on that fight specifically, not having aspect of the Fox for this certain part makes it unbelievably hard and almost impossible. It would be, you know, like I always think of P1 Blackhand, where you're just running in a circle with aspect of the Fox up the entire time. Like it would have been way harder to beat the DPS check for that if aspect of the Fox did not exist, and harder to heal. So yeah, that definitely something to look at. I think that's enough on that.